Have you ever stood alone in the forest at dusk, when the last light bleeds from the sky, and felt it? That primal electricity crawling up your spine. The absolute certainty that something is watching you from between the trees. Your rational mind says it's nothing, but every instinct screaming through millions of years of evolution tells you to run. What if I told you that feeling, that ancient terror, has a name? What if I told you it has teeth? Today, we're going deep into one of the most bone-chilling legends ever whispered around dying campfires. A creature so terrifying that indigenous peoples spoke of it only in hushed voices. A monster that doesn't just kill you, it transforms you, corrupts you, makes you become the very thing you fear most. This is the legend of the Wendigo. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you'll never look at the winter woods the same way again. Let's begin. The Ancient Whispers. The story begins long before European settlers ever set foot in North America. For thousands of years, the Algonquian-speaking peoples, the Ojibwe, the Cree, the Naskapi, and others told stories of something lurking in the deepest, darkest parts of the northern forests. They had a name for it, a word that makes even the bravest souls shudder: Wendigo. The translation alone should tell you everything you need to know. The evil spirit that devours mankind. Not hunts, not kills, devours. This isn't just another monster legend. The Wendigo isn't some Hollywood creation designed to sell movie tickets. This is something that has been woven into the cultural fabric of indigenous peoples for centuries. A warning, a teaching, and, according to some, a very real threat. These weren't stories told for entertainment. They were survival information, passed down from elder to child with deadly seriousness. Break certain taboos, the elders warned, and you won't just die. You'll become something far worse than dead. You'll become the monster. So what exactly are we dealing with here? What does a Wendigo actually look like? Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. A figure emerges from the tree line. At first you think it's a person, maybe lost, injured, but as it gets closer, your blood turns to ice. This thing is tall, impossibly tall, 15, maybe 20 feet high. Its body is gaunt, skeletal, like someone or something hasn't eaten in months. Bones jut against skin so tight it looks like parchment stretched over a frame of sticks and angles. But here's the thing that really breaks your mind. Despite looking starved to the point of death, this creature is enormous, powerful. Its limbs are too long, its joints bend in ways that aren't quite right. When it moves, it's with a jerky, twitching motion that reminds you of a puppet with broken strings. Then you see its face. The eyes are sunken so deep into the skull, they look like dark pits. But inside those pits, there's a light, a cold, malevolent glow that fixes on you with an intelligence that's distinctly, horrifyingly human. The skin is the color of a corpse, grayish-white, sometimes described as looking like it's covered in frost or decay. Its lips are tattered, sometimes said to be missing entirely, revealing rows of yellowed, broken teeth. Some accounts describe antlers sprouting from its skull, like a twisted mockery of the caribou and deer it once hunted as a human. Others speak of long, black claws that can rip through flesh and bone like tissue paper. Its hair hangs in matted, filthy tangles, and from its body emanates a stench, the smell of rot, of death, of something fundamentally wrong with the natural order. But the most terrifying feature, the one thing every single account agrees on, it's hunger. The Wendigo is always, always hungry. It doesn't matter how much it eats. It could devour an entire settlement and it would still crave more. In fact, here's where the nightmare gets worse. The more a Wendigo consumes, the larger it grows. And the larger it grows, the hungrier it becomes. It's a cycle that can never end, an eternal damnation of insatiable appetite. Imagine that for a second. Imagine being trapped in a body that grows with every meal, but the hunger grows even faster. Forever starving, no matter how much you feed. That's not just a monster, that's a glimpse into hell itself. The transformation, how monsters are made. Here's where the Wendigo legend gets really disturbing, because it forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. What separates us from the monster? You're not born a Wendigo, you become one. Picture this scenario. It's the dead of winter in the northern wilderness, sometime in the 1800s. Your small group of hunters got caught in an early blizzard, miles from the nearest settlement. The temperature has plummeted to 40 below zero. Your supplies are gone. Days turn into weeks. The snow keeps falling, and you haven't eaten in so long that your body is consuming itself. Everyone is dying. You can see it in their eyes, that hollow, distant look. Your friend, your brother, your father, they're not going to make it, and if you don't eat something soon, neither will you. Then someone dies, and you're faced with an impossible choice. According to the legend, this is the moment. This is when the line between human and monster becomes terrifyingly thin. The act of cannibalism, of consuming human flesh, is seen as the ultimate taboo, a crossing of a sacred boundary that was never meant to be crossed. When you take that first bite, something changes, not just psychologically, though God knows that's traumatic enough. According to the legends, something else happens, something spiritual, evil. An ancient spirit that has been waiting in the darkness slides into your body like a hand into a glove. At first, maybe you don't notice. The meat sustains you. You survive. But then the changes begin. Your appetite doesn't return to normal. It intensifies. Normal food doesn't satisfy you anymore. You start having dreams, dark visions of hunting, of the taste of flesh. Your body begins to change, growing taller, thinner. Your eyes sink, your skin pales. The hunger grows and grows and grows until it's the only thing you can think about. And then one day, you're not human anymore. You're Wendigo. But here's the really chilling part. Cannibalism isn't the only path to transformation. The legend warns that extreme greed, selfishness, and gluttony can also attract the Wendigo. It's a profound metaphor, how our darkest impulses, our basest desires, can literally transform us into monsters. Think about it. How many people do you know who've been consumed by greed, by an appetite that can never be satisfied? The Wendigo legend is telling us that when you let these impulses control you, when you sacrifice your humanity for your hunger, whether that hunger is for food, wealth, power, or anything else, you risk becoming something no longer human.
Wendigo psychosis, when legend becomes reality. Now, let's talk about something that's going to make your skin crawl. Wendigo psychosis. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, ethnographers and early psychologists working with Algonquian communities started documenting something absolutely terrifying. They encountered individuals who genuinely believed they were transforming into Wendigos. This wasn't just paranoia. These people would develop an intense, overwhelming craving for human flesh. They would become convinced that they were possessed by the Wendigo spirit. The symptoms were horrifying: severe depression and anxiety, complete loss of appetite for normal food, obsessive thoughts about cannibalism, violent outbursts, social withdrawal, extreme paranoia, and a growing fear and certainty that they were becoming a monster. Imagine living through that. Imagine waking up one day and feeling your mind turning against you, convinced that you're transforming into the very creature your people have feared for generations. Imagine the terror of fighting against your own thoughts, your own cravings. These cases were taken with deadly seriousness by Indigenous communities. This wasn't seen as mental illness, it was seen as spiritual corruption, a genuine supernatural threat, and the response was sometimes just as extreme. In some documented cases, individuals suffering from Wendigo psychosis were killed by their own families or communities, seen as mercy killings to save the person's soul and protect everyone else. Modern psychiatry has offered alternative explanations. Some researchers link Wendigo psychosis to extreme nutritional deficiencies, particularly a lack of vitamin thiamine during periods of starvation. Others point to the intense psychological stress of winter isolation and famine. The human mind, pushed to its absolute limits, can break in strange and terrifying ways. But here's what makes this so unsettling. These explanations don't actually contradict the legend. They just describe the same phenomenon from a different angle. Whether you call it Wendigo psychosis or starvation-induced psychosis, the result is the same: people becoming convinced they're turning into cannibalistic monsters. The question that should keep you up at night is this: were these people actually possessed by an evil spirit, or did the legend itself become so powerful that it could literally drive people insane? Or, and this is the truly horrifying possibility, are both explanations somehow true? The legend walks: real encounters with the Wendigo. Now we move from cultural history into much darker territory. We're talking about alleged real-world encounters, eyewitness accounts, stories from people who claim they've seen something in the woods that shouldn't exist. Let me tell you about Jack Fiddler. Jack Fiddler was an OG Cree shaman who lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. To his people, he was a hero, a protector, a Wendigo hunter. According to his own testimony, Jack Fiddler killed 14 Wendigos during his lifetime. Think about that. 14. To the Canadian authorities who arrested him in 1907, he was simply a serial killer. But to Fiddler and his community, every single one of those killings was necessary. They weren't murders, they were executions. They were mercy killings designed to stop the transformation before it completed. The case that finally brought him down involved a woman who, according to Fiddler, was on the verge of becoming a Wendigo. She had stopped eating, she was having visions, she was beginning to crave human flesh. So Fiddler did what he had done 13 times before. He killed her before the transformation could finish. He saw it as saving her soul. The Canadian government saw it as murder. Jack Fiddler was arrested and put on trial. He never made it to sentencing. He died in custody, either from suicide or under mysterious circumstances, depending on who you ask. His brother, who was also arrested, died the same way. This case is absolutely fascinating because it shows the collision between two completely different worldviews. To Western law enforcement, these were clear-cut murders, but to Jack Fiddler and his community, these were acts of desperate protection against a supernatural threat that was absolutely real. So who was right? Was Jack Fiddler a murderer using superstition to justify killing? Or was he a genuine hero fighting something the modern world refuses to acknowledge? The terrifying thing is, we may never know. Modern encounters, the Wendigo in the 21st century. The stories didn't end with Jack Fiddler, not even close. Even today, right now in 2025, people are reporting encounters with something in the northern wilderness, something that fits the description of the Wendigo perfectly. Campers in northern Ontario, Minnesota, Manitoba, and the Northwest Territories continue to report experiences that defy rational explanation. They hear screams echoing through the forest at night, sounds that aren't quite human but aren't quite animal either. A sound that makes your blood run cold and your instincts scream at you to get as far away as possible. They find tracks, massive footprints in snow or mud, far larger than any human, showing a stride length that seems impossible. The tracks are often described as partially human-like, but wrong somehow. The toes too long, the spacing off, the depth suggesting something far heavier than any person. One account from a group of hunters in northern Manitoba is particularly chilling. They were in a cabin, miles from anyone, when they heard something walking around outside, but it wasn't walking like a person or an animal. The steps were spaced too far apart, and whatever was making them was tall enough that they could hear it brushing against the roof of the cabin. They stayed inside, rifles ready, listening to this thing circle their shelter for hours. When dawn finally came and they ventured outside, they found tracks in the snow. The prints led from the forest, circled the cabin multiple times, then headed back into the trees. They followed the tracks for about 50 yards before coming to a complete stop. Not at a tree, not at a river or cliff. The tracks just ended in the middle of an open stretch of snow. Whatever had been stalking them simply vanished. Then there's the case that really gets under my skin. A group of experienced hikers in northern Ontario reported being stalked for 3 consecutive nights. They never saw it clearly, but they knew something was following them. They'd hear branches breaking in the darkness, always just beyond the reach of their flashlights. They'd hear breathing, heavy, rasping breaths that sounded almost human, but not quite. On the 3rd night, one of them woke up at 3 a.m. to find all their food supplies had been taken from the bear bag they'd hung in a tree. The rope had been cut or bitten through, and the bag was gone. But here's the thing. The tree they'd used was next to their tents. Whatever took the food had crept within feet of where they were sleeping. They also reported hearing whispers, not words they could understand, but sounds that had the rhythm and cadence of speech, like something was trying to communicate with them in a language that predated human civilization. They abandoned their trip immediately, hiking out in the dark rather than spending another night in those woods. When they reported it to local authorities, they were told it was probably just a bear. But bears don't whisper.
The Nahanni Valley, Headless Horror. We need to talk about the Nahanni Valley, also known as Headless Valley. Located in Canada's Northwest Territories, this remote wilderness has been the site of so many mysterious deaths and disappearances that it's earned its grim nickname.
Since the early 1900s, prospectors, trappers, and adventurers have ventured into the Nahanni Valley seeking fortune. Many of them never came back. Those who were found were often discovered in, let's just say, disturbing conditions. Multiple victims were found decapitated, their heads never recovered. Others simply vanished without a trace, despite extensive search efforts. The local Dene people have legends about the valley going back centuries. They speak of evil spirits that guard the land, of monsters that hunt anyone foolish enough to trespass. Some researchers have drawn direct parallels between these legends and the Wendigo myths. Now, skeptics will point out that the Nahanni Valley is incredibly dangerous terrain. Rapids, waterfalls, harsh weather, and treacherous rock formations could easily account for deaths and disappearances, and they'd be absolutely right. But that doesn't explain the decapitations. It doesn't explain why some bodies were found with expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces. It doesn't explain why experienced frontiersmen, people who had survived decades in the wilderness, would make fatal mistakes in that valley. Could there be something in Headless Valley? Something ancient and hungry that views humans as trespassers? I don't have the answer, but I'll tell you this. There are guides in the Northwest Territories who absolutely refuse to take clients into certain parts of the Nahanni Valley. They won't tell you why. They'll just shake their heads and say, some places aren't meant for people. And maybe they're right. The skeptic's case. Rational explanations. Look, I know what some of you are thinking. This is all fascinating folklore, but surely there's a rational explanation for everything we've discussed, right? The skeptics make valid points. Let's examine them. Misidentification. In the dark, in unfamiliar wilderness, with fear already pumping through your system, it's remarkably easy to misidentify what you're seeing. A bear suffering from mange can look absolutely horrifying, gaunt, skeletal, moving strangely because of pain or illness. A moose standing on its hind legs to reach high branches can create a silhouette that looks disturbingly humanoid. Even a dead tree with branches at odd angles can, in the right light, create the impression of something watching you. The power of suggestion. If you go into the woods believing in the Wendigo, you're primed to interpret everything through that lens. Every crack of a branch becomes evidence of a stalker. Every shadow holds a monster. The human brain is incredible at pattern recognition, so good that it sometimes finds patterns that aren't really there. It's called apophenia, and it's a fundamental part of how we process information. Isolation and stress. Spending extended time alone in the wilderness, especially in harsh conditions, can do strange things to the human mind. Sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, hunger, and cold can all produce hallucinations. The psychological pressure of being in a survival situation can trigger paranoia and make you see threats that don't exist. Cultural transmission. Once a legend becomes embedded in a culture, it becomes a self-reinforcing belief system. If you're raised hearing Wendigo stories, if your community takes the threat seriously, then experiencing something frightening in the woods will naturally be interpreted through that cultural lens. These are all legitimate explanations. They account for many, maybe even most, alleged Wendigo encounters. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. They don't explain everything. What if it's real? So let's entertain a different possibility. What if, just what if, the legends are based on something real? Some cryptozoologists and paranormal researchers have proposed theories that are frankly terrifying to consider. Theory 1. Undiscovered species. Could the Wendigo be a relict hominid, a species that has survived in the remote northern wilderness by avoiding human contact? There are vast stretches of Canadian and Alaskan wilderness that remain almost completely unexplored. If a species wanted to hide, there's plenty of room. Theory 2. Interdimensional entity. Some researchers propose that the Wendigo might not be from our reality at all. The reports of it appearing and disappearing, the tracks that end in the middle of nowhere, the sense of wrongness people feel in its presence. What if it's something that can phase between dimensions, something that exists primarily in another reality, but can cross into ours under certain conditions? Theory 3. Spiritual reality. Maybe the indigenous peoples had it right all along. Maybe the Wendigo is exactly what they say it is, an evil spirit that can possess people and manifest physically under the right circumstances. Our modern materialist worldview might not have all the answers. Theory 4. Collective unconscious manifestation. Carl Jung proposed that certain archetypes exist in the collective unconscious of humanity. What if the Wendigo is one of these archetypes, and under the right psychological and environmental conditions, it can somehow become manifest, not just in people's minds, but in physical reality? I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. But consider this. The descriptions of the Wendigo are remarkably consistent across centuries and across different Algonquian groups that had limited contact with each other. The core elements remain the same: the gaunt appearance, the insatiable hunger, the transformation through cannibalism or greed, the winter association. If it were purely folklore, you'd expect more variation. Stories change in the telling, details get added or lost, but the Wendigo legend has remained strangely stable. Why? The monster within. Here's what I think is the real power of the Wendigo legend, regardless of whether the creature physically exists or not. It forces us to confront something we'd rather not think about. All of us have the capacity for darkness. All of us have hungers that could, if we let them, consume us entirely. The Wendigo represents what happens when we cross certain lines, when we let our basest impulses take control. The transformation isn't always literal. You don't need to sprout claws and antlers to become a monster. Every day we see people transformed by greed, by the endless pursuit of more, more, more. They become hollow inside, empty, perpetually unsatisfied no matter how much they consume. That's the Wendigo spirit in action. The legend teaches us that the line between human and monster is thinner than we'd like to believe. It teaches us that our choices matter, that there are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, that the hunger, whether for flesh, for wealth, for power, can never truly be satisfied once you let it take control. In that sense, the Wendigo is absolutely real. It's just that most people carrying it don't have glowing eyes or skeletal bodies. They have corner offices. They have multi-million-dollar homes. They have more than they could ever need, and they still want more. The Wendigo survives because it speaks to a fundamental truth about the human condition. We are all capable of becoming monsters if we're not careful. Final thoughts: staying human. So here we are, at the end of our journey into the darkness. Let me ask you the question I posed at the beginning. Is the Wendigo real? Honestly, I don't know, and I'm not sure anyone can know for certain. But I'll tell you this: Whether it's a physical creature stalking the northern forests, a spiritual entity that can possess the desperate, or a powerful metaphor for the darkness within human nature, the Wendigo is real in the ways that matter. It's real in the lessons it teaches us about staying human even when circumstances try to strip that humanity away. It's real in the warning it provides about the dangers of insatiable appetite. It's real in the fear it inspires, a fear that keeps us aware of our own capacity for evil. And maybe, just maybe, it's real in the shadows between the trees, waiting for someone to make that crucial mistake.